already in the live stream, thank you so much for joining in on today's live stream talking about the Federal Reserve and pausing the interest rate cuts. This is going to be a big deal to a lot of people, considering that a year ago, it would be hard to have found anybody who did not see the Federal Reserve taking interest rates back to zero or cutting extremely, like cutting a lot out of the Fed funds rate. We hardly seen any cuts take place. We saw a major 50 basis point cut originally, and then 2 more quarter point cuts after that. And really, this is not an extreme amount of easing that has taken place within the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy. In fact, there's no easing taking place at all. It's still very restrictive. It's a tightening cycle. And so I find it very odd when I come across articles like the one down in the description talking about the Federal Reserve and explaining how it is that they're going into this easing cycle of lowering interest rates. This is very, very naive. This is not accurate. The Federal Reserve is in a tightening cycle, quantitative tightening. They are not easing. They are not lowering interest rates to try and stimulate the economy. That is not the strategy that is being done right now. What they are doing is they are trying to position the Fed funds rate to be neutral, right? Neutral is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. They do not want to move into an accommodating position with the Fed funds rate that would be very inflationary. At least this is how a lot of people are viewing it. What they are trying to do is be in a position that is slightly over neutral and have the inflationary scenario be moderately above 2% for some time. That is their goal. That is their inflation goal. Moderately above 2% for some time. And the reason why they are doing moderately above 2% for some time is for making up for the fact that they failed to achieve the 2% target over the previous 2 decades. Now, this is something that we have talked about many times on this channel. I have shown the evidence of it many times. In fact, I'm going to read it to you again. This is coming from the Federal Reserve itself. This is the statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies. Right? Oops, let me bring it back up here. And it says this was adopted January 24th of 2012, then reaffirmed January 30th of 2024. So a little over a year ago, or not quite a year ago, I guess I should say. And this is what it has to say. In order to anchor long-term inflation expectations, at this level of the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. Right? So this is important to understand, the 2% over time. It's not a 2% target, it's a 2% goal. The goal is to achieve a 2% average inflation rate over time. And this is very important to understand, because now most people are looking at the Federal Reserve saying, hey, they are attempting to get to a 2% target with inflation. But that's not the case. And so as people are looking at what it is that they are attempting to do with the monetary policy in order to achieve a 2% target, it is very misunderstood, because that is not what the Federal Reserve is up to. The Federal Reserve is attempting to get to a 2% average inflation rate over time. It goes on to say this: the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. Again, I have read this stuff so many times on this channel. It is something that I have been trying to get out there for people to internalize, and that we would find more people talking about this topic in the mainstream media. They do not. You will not find anybody out there who is talking about flexible average inflation targeting, except the Federal Reserve itself in their own statements. Not the ones that they put out there on the mainstream media, the ones that are hidden within their own words. Now, again, this is coming from Michelle Bowman, April 5th of 2024. So although this was quite a few months ago, it was less than a year ago. And what she had to say was this: A change to the strategy statement was the adoption of what some refer to as asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting. This is what Michelle Bowman, voting member of the FOMC, these are the people who are in charge of monetary policy, not Donald Trump, not Jerome Powell, the FOMC, 12 voting members. This is one of them. Michelle Bowman is incredibly influential at the FOMC. Right? The change of the strategy statement was the adoption of what some refer to as asymmetric flexible average inflation targeting. Specifically, the new statement noted that in order to anchor long-term inflation expectation at its 2% goal, right? Again, people think of the Federal Reserve and their 2% goal being a 2% target. This is what Michelle Bowman is describing as their goal. In order to anchor long-term inflation expectation at its 2% goal, the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. Okay? This is so important to understand. 99% of the people are getting this wrong. This is the reason why I keep coming out here and saying this stuff over and over again, because I'm finding articles like the one I left down in the description who is actually stating that the Federal Reserve is in their easing cycle. That is so inaccurate. That is probably the furthest thing from the truth that could ever possibly have been stated. And this is the propaganda that is being spread all over the media right now. Is this exact same style of thought and belief of the strategy. It's so inaccurate. I cannot say any more than this is not even coming close to reality, what these people are saying. What I am speaking from the FOMC, their own statements, this is the reality of the situation. 99% of the people are missing it. And it's so sad. It's scary in a sense. Like, other people think, they look out there and they're like, oh, talk about all the scary stuff that the new administration, all this other banking and all the other stuff. You know what's scary to me is that they are able to pull this off. That scares the hell out of me. They were able to pull this off and literally trick 99% of the people out there. All these famous people out there, all these famous economists, all these analysts out there, all these, every last one of them has it inaccurate. It is scary. That is scary to think, right? Those of you who think that this is new, that's wrong. It's not new. This is a plan that they had set into motion a long time ago. Here in John Williams' speech, dated November of 2018, this is what he has to say. The option of average inflation targeting, whereby the central bank purposefully aims to achieve an above target inflation rate in good times, when the lower bound is not a constraint. Properly designed and implemented, such an overshoot can offset the inflation undershoot during bad times, so that the long run average inflation rate and inflation expectations are in line with the target. Right? 2018. They were talking about doing this exact thing that we are now sitting in. This isn't new. This isn't a new idea. This is conceptualized literally over 6 years ago. Right? Now, to me, it's very clear. I understand why the Federal Reserve is doing exactly what they are doing. See, they want an elevated inflation expectation to raise the neutral interest rate. If you can raise the neutral interest rate, what you will do is be in a position in which the Fed funds rate is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And with an elevated Fed funds rate and an elevated neutral interest rate, this gives the Federal Reserve the ammunition that they need in order to stimulate the economy during a downturn, because they're able to drop the Fed funds rate far enough below neutral to actually create an impact on the economy. See, it didn't work before. The lowering of interest rates would hit the lower bound to zero and not be an effective tool. They knew this was coming. They knew that the Fed funds rate was going to get to zero and that it would no longer be an effective tool for stimulating the economy. You know how long ago they knew that? They knew it way back in 2001. Is that what it was? Oh, sorry, 2002. From November 21st of 2002, Ben Bernanke had deflation, making sure it doesn't happen here. In that, he said this: deflation recession may differ in one respect from a normal recession, in which that inflation rate is at least modestly positive. Deflation of sufficient magnitude may result in nominal interest rates declining to zero or very close to zero. Now, think about this. This is before the great financial crisis. This is before any of that stuff took place. The Fed funds rate was still above zero. They hadn't reached the lower bound yet. And it was years and years before they actually did that this statement was being made. See, Ben Bernanke saw it coming. The Fed knew it was coming. They knew that they were going to have the Fed funds rate eventually hit zero, and it would screw up their monetary policy. They would no longer have one through the use of interest rate adjustments. It was over. It says it right here. They knew it was coming years ahead of time. Deflation of sufficient magnitude may result in nominal interest rates declining to zero or very close to zero. Once interest rates is at zero, no further downward adjustment in rates can occur. That's it. It's over. Game over. Since lenders generally will not accept a negative nominal interest rate when it is possible instead to hold cash. At this point, the nominal interest rate is said to have hit the zero bound. Now, this is exactly what happened during the Great Financial Crisis. And again, this statement that Ben Bernanke is making within this speech came out 6-7 years before the Great Financial Crisis. Well, 5-6 years before the Great Financial Crisis. Goes on to say this: because central banks conveniently conduct monetary policy by manipulating the short-term nominal interest rates, some observers have concluded that when the key rate stands at or near zero, the central bank has, quote, run out of ammunition. It doesn't work anymore. They're done. Monetary policy had come to an end through the interest rate adjustments. It was no longer an effective tool. Ben Bernanke was admitting that over 20 years ago. They knew it. They knew that it was going to work. It wasn't going to work. It was going to break. I'll read it again. Some observers have concluded that when that key rate stands at or near zero, talking about the Fed funds rate, the central bank has run out of ammunition. That is, it no longer has the power to expand aggregate demand and hence the economic activity. They're done. End the game, right? Game over. It is true that once the policy rate has been driven down to zero, a central bank can no longer use its traditional means of stimulating aggregate demand and thus will be operating in less familiar territory. The central bank's inability to use its traditional methods may complicate the policy-making process and introduce uncertainty in the size and timing of the economy's response to policy actions. Hence, I agree that the situation is one to be avoided if possible. So he was talking about it. Hey, let's not be there if we can prevent it. If we can keep from hitting the lower bound of zero, we should do that at all costs, because once we do, we are out of ammunition, run out of ammunition. This is their words, not mine, right? I'm not making this stuff up. This is coming directly from Ben Bernanke himself. And he knew it then. If they hit zero, they're screwed. Interest rate adjustments for stimulating the economy would no longer happen. It was done. It was over. The conclusion that deflation is always reversible under a fiat system follows from basic economic reasoning. This is where it gets really good. And this is the reason why I keep coming out here and talking this stuff that I do. And I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself over and over again, but if we do not internalize this information in this fashion, we will be, I swear, you will act, how do I describe this? You will be put in a position in which that the Federal Reserve and their actions will absolutely damage you. You will be making decisions that are inappropriate for your future and will be absolutely in line with what it is that the Federal Reserve needs from you in order for them to continue to conduct themselves. If you do not take this information in, you will literally be benefiting the Federal Reserve. Okay. The conclusion that deflation is always reversible under a fiat money system follows from the basic economic reasoning. A little parable may prove useful. Today, an ounce of gold sells for $300 more or less. Now, suppose that modern alchemist solves his subject's oldest problem by finding a way to produce unlimited amounts of new gold at essentially no cost. Moreover, his invention is widely publicized and scientifically verified, and he announces his intention to begin the massive production of gold within days. What would happen to the price of gold? Presumably, the potentially unlimited supply of cheap gold would cause the market price of gold to plummet. Indeed, if the market for gold is to any degree efficient, the price of gold would collapse immediately after the announcement of the invention, before the alchemist had produced and marketed a single ounce of the yellow metal. This is their monetary policy. What I have just described to you with this gold machine is their monetary policy. It's their words, it's the forward guidance, it's the signaling, it's the jawboning, it's the credible threat. This isn't me making it up, it's Ben Bernanke describing it literally 20 years ago. Nobody knows. Nobody knows about the gold machine. Right? Goes on to say this. What has this got to do with monetary policy? Like gold, US dollars have a value only to the extent that they are strictly limited in supply. But the US government has a technology called a printing press, or today its electronic equivalent, that allows it to produce as many dollars as it wishes at essentially no cost. By increasing the number of US dollars in circulation, or even by credibly threatening to do so. The US government can also reduce the value of the dollar in terms of goods and services, which is equivalent to raising the prices of dollars of those goods and services. We conclude that under a paper money system, the determined government can always generate higher spending and hence positive inflation. You see what they needed? Deflation is their biggest scare. Inflation is what they needed. If they didn't have inflation, it would be over. Monetary policy would be over. We would not have the central banking system. We would be absolutely in chaos right now. However, with the elevated inflation expectation and the elevated inflation that comes from that expectation, it saved the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. They were able to get their ammunition back. Right? I mean, you think about it, Ben Bernanke was talking about them running out of ammunition. When the key rate stands at or near zero, the central bank has, quote, run out of ammunition. So if you read that back, the opposite of that, when the key rate stands at or above zero or well above zero, they are regaining their ammunition. You see how most people are missing this? I'm literally the only one out here on the internet who is breaking this down like this. Like literally the only one. There are other people out there who understand the neutral interest rate. We did a video on it just yesterday, but they still don't get it. They still don't get what it is that the Federal Reserve is attempting to do. The Federal Reserve wants to sit on their hands and do nothing. Nothing at all except for speak some words. When they speak the words, the action takes place within the economy and it works. It's working right now. We can see it. I mean, think about it. At the end of 2023, there was so much talk about all these interest rate cuts and all this stuff that was going to happen within the economy after the Federal Reserve lowered rates, and none of that stuff happened. None of it. Not a single thing. It was all credible threats, 100% of it the entire time. But it worked within the economy because what did we see happen? We saw that the mortgage rates were coming down all for the first half of 2024. The moment that they cut rates, it went the opposite way. Nobody understands what's happening out here because they're focused in on the wrong thing. They're focused in on the action. They're not focused in on the words. And because they're focused in on that action, they are missing it. They are missing the real monetary policy and why it is that the Federal Reserve is doing what they are doing. Okay? Ben Bernanke explains it. John Williams warned about it, right? Powell is talking about it right now, how it is that it's taken place. Michelle Bowman has reiterated it. However, nobody sees it. It's crickets out there. Nobody gets it. All right, 20 minutes into this. Let's read this. Powell said that they're not going to change their flexible average inflation rate targeting even during their 5-year review. That's their bread and butter. Did he actually say that? I mean, is that an actual statement now that has come out? I mean, if he did, I mean, I kind of missed that one. I've been kind of busy lately. All right. Government growth through creation of new letter agency. Okay. Hyder over there eating lunch. All right. Recession incoming rates will have to go lower. Recession incoming, right? Okay, so a lot of people have been saying that for quite some time. They've been talking about how we're going to be running into this recession. There's all kinds of indication of recession and stuff like that. Now, I don't know how many years I've been saying it now, but we're in a recessionless recession, right? Well, what are the worst parts of a recession? What are the two worst things about a recession? People lose their jobs and the corporations get bailed out, right? Those are the two worst parts of the recession. Everybody loses their job and the corporations get bailed out. What if you already bailed out the corporations and people losing their job doesn't raise the unemployment? What if that was to take place? I mean, that is taking place. But I said that a couple of years ago, that this very well could be the case that we are facing going into the future, and it did occur. It occurred exactly how I thought it would. Now, again, I'm not trying to be like, oh, hey, man, I'm the arrogant one who's all awesome and knows everything. But I called this stuff out. I called the recessionless recession a while ago, and I described it exactly like what is going down. These major corporations, these zombie corporations who are failing, going bankrupt and laying everybody off, those people are going to work at the service industry. It's not a great job, but it's a job, and if you have a job, you're not unemployed. And that's what we are facing. I said that so many years ago. So no, I don't believe we're going into a recession. And even if we were in a recession, I don't think it's going to be the same appearance of a recession like we had anticipated from previous recessions. The indicators don't work. The inverted yield curve being, going back to a steepening yield curve didn't work. SOM rule didn't work, right? All these things that people had typically looked at saying this is going to be a recessionary indication didn't work. It's because we're not in the same monetary policy. We're not in the same economy. People don't know that, right? People don't realize that. They still look at the Federal Reserve and the Fed funds rate as being the main monetary policy tool. It's not, right? It's the spoken words about it that's the main monetary policy tool. Nobody knows that, right? So you can see how confused people are when it comes to understanding the Federal Reserve, the monetary policy, and how that impacts the economy. It's because they're not accustomed to this. They're accustomed to the way that the Federal Reserve had conducted themselves for decades. And although the Federal Reserve communicates in a way as if that's taken place, it's that communication about it that's the main monetary policy tool now. I say this every time. And even still then, when people hear that, they'll still ask me, are they going to cut next time or not? Or how much more are they going to cut? It doesn't matter. It literally does not matter. But the words about it does. It means everything. And it's not me just making this up. This is the Federal Reserve saying this, right? I mean, again, this is the Federal Reserve. Let me see if I can find it here. So, that one. Hold on here. Let me see if I can find the right speech here, because I'm not seeing it right offhand. There it is, Jefferson. Here we go. All right. So this is really, the Federal Reserve knew. They knew that it would take their communication, right? And that they would have to develop this communication because they didn't have it. They didn't have it before. Like in Greenspan Day, they didn't have a way of delivering the information out there to the public. They literally had to develop the tools to do it. And they like literally organized this out, figured it out, and delivered new ways of communicating to the public, right? And this is what it says. This is a speech that I got from May 13th of 2024. So again, these aren't that old. These are less than a year old. And this is communicating about monetary policy. Literally, that's the title of this speech. Communicating about monetary policy. Like, I mean, let me show you, right? Communicating about monetary policy. And this is what it has to say. During the tenure of Chairman Bernanke, there was another burst of innovation in the way that monetary policy was communicated. In 2007, the first SEP, that's the Statement on Economic Projections, the first SEP was published to convey systematically the economic outlook of the FOMC participants. In 2011, Chairman Bernanke started holding press conferences after every FOMC meeting. In 2012, the Federal Reserve adopted an explicit inflation target of 2% and started publishing individual FOMC participants' view of a participant's view on the appropriate future path of the Fed funds rate, now famously known as the dot plot. You see this? Starting in 2007, they knew. I mean, you think about it. Ben Bernanke put that speech out in 2012, talking about the gold machine. Or I'm sorry, 2002, talking about the gold machine. This is 2007, 5 years later, knowing that they would have to be communicating about it. They were setting up the tools that they needed to communicate about the Fed funds rate. Right? 2007, the SEP published. The 2011, Ben Bernanke started holding press conferences. 2012, they came up with that famously known dot plot. And then during these years, Loretta Mester, famous Federal Reserve official, in her capacity as the research director of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, contributed to the ongoing work on communications in collaboration with the policymakers of the Federal Reserve Board. This is what they were doing. They were figuring out how it is that they could deliver this information to you. They were doing that during right before the Great Financial Crisis, and then during the Great Financial Crisis, they developed and refined these tools. Of course, this was an extraordinary time for monetary policy, as interest rates in most advanced economies were close to zero following the global financial crisis. Right? Again, Ben Bernanke talked about how they ran out of monetary policy when they were close to zero, but that's okay because they could use their words. Right? So they developed the way to deliver the words. They developed those tools. Here, these are the communication channels that we can use to deliver these words. Right? Goes on to say, most advanced economies were close to zero during the Great Financial Crisis. The FOMC employed forward guidance. They employed forward guidance, explicit communication about the future path of policy rate, as a key tool to deal with the unprecedented situation. Did you hear them? They said that they were talking about the communication, explicit communication tools, as their key tool to deal with the unprecedented situation. They weren't talking about the key tool being an adjustment of monetary policy. Right? The adjustment of monetary policy through interest rate adjustments wasn't an effective tool because they were at zero. It didn't work. The research community had found that such forward guidance could be very effective in the context of the new Keynesian paradigm. No kidding. Absolutely, totally agree with that statement, because if you are paying attention to the Federal Reserve's communication at the end of 2023, it's worked swimmingly at stimulating the economy going into 2024. It was the moment that they actually took action that the reverse took place. And things started getting worse. Like, I don't know about worse. Things started getting tighter. The moment that they cut, which is an easing to most people, even though they have to go below neutral to actually ease, did the exact opposite within the economy, and interest rates started going up. Again, if you think about the communication, they were saying, hey, things aren't looking that great out here. We have to lower rates. Look, 50 basis point cut. That literally shocked the people, the market, the economy out there into believing that we were going into bad times, and they took appropriate defensive actions, which means interest rates go up. So easy to see it. Once you understand and see the communications being the effective tool, everything starts to clear up. everything starts to make a lot more sense. It's the times that you think, man, they are flying off the seat of their pants or making snap decisions or being influenced by the administration that you lose the ability to see their monetary policy. The moment that you say that, you will lose the ability to see their monetary policy. If you are blaming tariffs, you are blaming the whatever. It doesn't matter what you're blaming out there. If it's not the communication that you are focused in on as the main monetary policy tool, you will miss it. In fact, you will come up with the assumption that it's something else, and you will blame anything other than this, other than their words. You will blame anything else. But once you see it, you will have no other choice. You will not see any other blame other than the fact that people have listened to the Federal Reserve in a way that then conducts the monetary policy. Once you see it in that fashion, everything starts to clear up. All right. 30 minutes into this, I probably got about 5 minutes left. I don't want Jeff Welch to be God. I need Jesus Christ. Okay, buy some platinum and figure out why you're smart for buying some. I'm not into the platinum thing. I own a little bit of platinum, but I don't own a whole lot of platinum, just simply because you have to have a net. Like, if you were to take a platinum coin down to the bar, you'd probably have a hell of a time selling it. If you take a silver eagle down to the bar, you're probably going to find somebody who will buy it, right? And that's the difference. It's not so much the price move in it, which might be, something that you're looking at. To me, it's more about the realistic ability to then use my silver in any fashion that I want. And that's even in that statement, it's a little difficult, because really you can use dollars any way you want, but you can't really necessarily use silver, and definitely not platinum, in any way you want. Eagle is not a good example. Well, whatever. I mean, it's a silver. It doesn't matter. The eagle is just the silver eagle is just in the use of what I said, it is just a generic term for another bullion piece out there. It doesn't matter what it is. So we're headed to horse and buggy too. I don't know. Eating green beans, chickens, and mashed potatoes. There you go. Cruise up here. So can we get back to lumber? I need to build my new home this spring. So we can, people ask me to talk about lumber, and I'm thinking, what else do you need to know about lumber that I haven't already stated? Like, in order for me to talk about lumber, something has to actually happen within lumber, right? I mean, I can't make something up to make lumber exciting. Right? Lumber has to be exciting for me to talk about it. And if it's just sitting there not doing anything, what's the point of talking about it? It doesn't do any good to talk about something that is just sitting there not doing anything. I mean, once the home builder sentiment picks up due to the buyer traffic increasing, then we'll have something to talk about. But until that happens, lumber is just lumber. It's just a boring ass commodity, just like it's always been. It was only the time that it elevated up to its all-time highs of 1,700 per thousand that shocked everybody, that got people focused in on lumber, which made it interesting to talk about. Nobody cares that lumber's at 550 per thousand or 600 per thousand. Nobody cares, right? And I mean, I could talk about it all day long and nobody's going to care. The moment it goes up to 1,200 per thousand or 1,500 per thousand, oh, you bet people are going to want to pay attention to it at that point. But by that point, it's already too late, right? All the move has already taken place. So again, I don't know what else it is that I can say about lumber other than pay attention to the builders. Once the home builder sentiment turns positive due to the buyer traffic increasing, you're going to see lumber start to really move after that. So if you want to see the preliminary, if you want to see the indication, follow the home builders. Home builder sentiment is very low when it comes to buyer traffic. Buyer traffic turns positive, builders will get excited, lumber prices will start to move up. Right now, not taking place. Very boring, very low. All right, I would say stick to what you know. I do know this. I absolutely know monetary policy better than anybody else on the internet right now. I don't mean to be cocky or sounding that way. Nobody, if you are not bringing up average inflation targeting, monetary policy having inflation moderately above 2% for some time, you are missing it. 99% of the people don't talk about that. Like I have a hard time finding anybody talking about average inflation targeting and not believing that the Federal Reserve is trying to attempt to get above 2%, not to the 2% target. Everybody, 99% of the people believe it's a 2% target that they are trying to achieve. Inaccurate. Every bit of their strategy, everything that they say, every topic that they bring up as far as what they believe is going on within the economy is therefore inaccurate strategy, because they initially missed what it is that the Federal Reserve is attempting to do. And I don't mean to talk down about these other people out there, because they are incredibly intelligent. I learned most of what I know from following these other people out there. However, they do not incorporate these things that I have found within the Federal Reserve's own statements in their strategy. And part of that is the communication of it and making sure that it is kept somewhat secret. It's not a secret. It's plain as day. It's written black and white right here, crystal clear. However, the communication out there is not. The communication put out there is very vague. It's very misunderstood. It's used in a gaslighting way to convince people that, hey, we're trying to get to 2%. No, we're not, because you're not really trying to get to 2%. You're trying to get to moderately above 2% for some time. And it's so, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's just like, that's it. And you look out there and you look at all these other people who are talking about the Federal Reserve and going in, pushing their easing cycle when they're not even in an easing cycle. Right? Like, I just don't, like, these people have no clue. None. And so I come out here and I try to share it with you. And I understand that I'm a dude in the 2001 S10 that's beat up, and I work at a lumber yard and I do retail sales for a living, and all these other people out there are flying at 30,000 feet with $100 million in their pocket talking about the Federal Reserve in a way that is now confusing the hell out of you. Right? Or out of the people, maybe not you because you follow me on this channel and so you actually have internalized the credible threat theory. But for most people out there, they don't see it. They do not see it. All these economists that I read, all these articles, all these interviews, all these people, nobody brings it up. Average inflation rate over time, inflation moderately above 2%. Right? I don't know what to say. Other than we get it. We understand why it is that they are doing the things they do. Everybody else is going off of these assumptions, or even worse, thinking that it's being influenced by the president or something. Those are the people who really miss it. They miss more of it than anybody else, is the people who think that Donald Trump actually has some power over the Fed. Alrighty, guys, this was a lot of fun, but I gotta go. 200 people watching. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. We got 75 likes right now. I used to love framing houses and such, but getting too old now. It's mostly Mexicans around here. Maybe not for long, though. Jeff, I agree. I love framing houses, and I don't know about, there being less Mexicans to help. I don't know. Like, to me, this is a very... I don't know. Like, to me... the whole idea of deportation on a mass scale sounds very Gestapo to me. Like, how do you do that? How do you take the initiative, the effort, the money, right, in order that it would take to do something like that? Is a very Gestapo thing, and I'm not down for it. I don't think it's gonna happen either. All right, do you have a channel, Brady? All right, I love watching farmers and bricklayers do their work. Same here, Jeff. I'm sticking to the handyman work till I get this nonprofit thing going. Good for you, man. All right. I have confidence in the channel. That's why I keep coming back in churning economy. Some people always do well. At $1,200 per day, there will run out of holding areas, but it works out to 500,000 people per year if they do this every day. Thanks, UE. Yep. All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hitting that like button. 212 people watching right now. By hitting that like button, the YouTube algorithm will pick up the video, spread it around for more people to join in, and we can continue on with this conversation. This is one of the best channels that you're going to find out there for breaking down monetary policy. Most of the people that you are listening to out there, they are They understand economics very well, but they do not or have missed the monetary policy coming from the Federal Reserve. And it's understandable. The mainstream media does not make it clear how it is that the Federal Reserve is truly conducting themselves. This is part of their strategy, and their communication style is to use that vague misunderstanding against you, right? If you truly understood the monetary policy from the Federal Reserve, if all the people of the country, of the world understood the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, they would not be able to conduct themselves the way they are, and they would fail. And if you really truly want to end the Federal Reserve, this is how we do it. Most people are not going to see it, so therefore they're going to misunderstand how it is that they're supposed to do their strategies, and they're going to misunderstand why it is that the Federal Reserve is doing what they're doing. Okay, guys, awesome time. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.